Today I'm in Salvador, Brazil, walking through the same streets where in 1822 Portuguese troops roamed. Drunk, angry and losing their grip on power, they patrolled this colonial city, desperate to crush Brazil's growing independence movement. They were looking for enemies, revolutionaries, anyone. They stopped at a convent, the Convent of Lapa. It was a sanctuary for nuns, a symbol of peace. But one woman stood in their way, a 60-year-old nun. She wasn't armed and she wasn't a soldier. But she told them, "You will only enter over my dead body." So they did. And they killed her. This is the story of Joana Angélica, the nun who became Brazil's first martyr of independence, and how one quiet act of defiance shook an empire. To understand why her death mattered, you need to understand what Salvador was in 1822. The city was a war zone. Salvador was the jewel of Portuguese Brazil, the colonial capital. It had sugar, wealth, a port that connected Europe to the tropics. But at this point, Brazil wasn't yet a country, just a colony dreaming of sovereignty. The Portuguese royal family had fled Napoleon years earlier, turning Brazil into the seat of the empire. But when they returned to Lisbon, they expected the colony to go back to being obedient. Brazil didn't. Especially not in Bahia, especially not in Salvador. The city was a powder keg. Royalist troops were in control, but independence fires were gathering in the countryside. And right in the middle were civilians, schools, churches and convents. Joana was born just a few blocks from here, in 1761. Salvador was still under colonial rule. She came from a wealthy family, educated, privileged, but she gave that up to join the Convent of Lapa, this huge fortress-like structure in the heart of the city. She became a leader there, a mentor, a spiritual guide. Joana wasn't fiery. She was known for her discipline, her calm, the kind of woman you'd expect to lead prayer, not defy an army. She wasn't planning a revolution. But on February 19th, 1822, revolution came to her. Portuguese soldiers were looking for rebels. They believed the convent was hiding them. Whether that was true or just an excuse to loot and plunder, it doesn't matter. They wanted in. Joana ordered her sisters to flee through the back. Then she walked to the iron gate at the front. She stood there alone and refused to open it. What happened next depends on who you ask, but the outcome is the same. Joana was stabbed with bayonets multiple times. Father Daniel Lisboa, a priest inside, was beaten to death with rifle butts. Neither fought back. To Portuguese loyalists, this was a necessary act. They claimed rebels fired from inside the convent, that Joana was just collateral damage. To Bahian revolutionaries, she became a symbol. A woman unarmed, standing in the gateway to a sacred place, and dying for it. Not for politics, not for glory, but for principle. She wasn't planning a revolt. She wasn't trying to be a hero. But when soldiers came to her, she chose to stand between violence and innocence, and that choice cost her everything. Let's be brutally honest, a nun dying during a military crackdown, that's not rare and that's not new. Empires have been climbing over the bodies of innocents since before written history. On the surface, this was yet another violent footnote in the book of imperial ambition. But that's exactly why it mattered, because sometimes tragedy hits a frequency that everyone hears. Something about Joana, her rage, her calm, her words, cut through the noise. Her death didn't just outrage the public, it unified them. Her death wasn't the end. In fact, it helped shift public opinion. It hardened resistance. By July 1823, Portuguese forces surrendered Salvador. Bahia was free. Brazil soon followed. Joana Angélica was mourned, then remembered. Her name can now be found on schools, streets, municipal buildings. But more than that, she became part of Brazil's identity. The nun who didn't move, the gate that didn't open. Today, the Convent of Lapa still stands, but just barely. It's closed to the public now, quiet, decaying. The walls are cracked, the paint is fading, and around the edges there's graffiti. Names, tags, messages, some angry, some just passing through. It's easy to miss what this place was. A convent, a sanctuary. The gate still stands and it's been restored a few times. And there's a small memorial in the back, near where Joana fell. Every year on July 2nd, Bahia's own Independence Day, people still remember her. Her name is on streets, schools, buses. But this place, where she made her final stand, it's slowly being erased. Not intentionally, just gradually. And maybe that's the danger. Not losing the building, but losing what it meant. But let's be honest with ourselves. We live in a world still full of immense suffering and darkness. You don't have to scroll far on your phone to find examples of the worst of us. It's easy to lose hope, to think resistance is pointless. But humanity didn't survive because we're the fastest or strongest. We survived because we protected each other, because we act together, because there will always be those who refuse to move, people who say, no, not through me. Today, in 2025, there's still a lot of darkness. War, violence, famine, injustice, you name it. But that darkness is essential for light to shine. What good is a torch without anything to light? Joana didn't know she'd become a symbol. She didn't ask to be martyred. She just stood at the gate and said no. And sometimes that's all it takes. You don't need a revolution. You don't need a battlefield. Sometimes the smallest acts, your acts, are the ripples that shift everything. Joana Angélica died at the threshold of a convent, but what she defied was an empire. So ask yourself, when the time comes at your gate, whether that be a moment, a choice, which side of the line will you stand on? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.